It's Wednesday, it's 12:15 and we're live in Westminster. Sir Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak went head-to-head for the first time in this election campaign. Who came out on top?
Well, 7.2 million, they're now 7.5 million. Who says they're coming down? And this is the guy who's good at maths.
Taxes are now being cut. Keir Starmer would put all that progress at risk. He would put up everyone's taxes by £2,000.
After accusations on tax plans and NHS waiting lists, we'll check those claims. Were the leaders disingenuous with their facts?
When Keir Starmer was asked about it 12 times, he couldn't rule it out. He couldn't say simply, no, that's not the case. It took him a very long time.
Well, it's Rishi Sunak who lied 12 times in the debate last night about Labour's tax plans. And the letter from the Permanent Secretary at the Treasury makes that absolutely clear.
Labour's First Minister in Wales, Vaughan Gething, faces a motion of no confidence today, and some within his own party think he could lose. And we'll be joined by the leader of Plaid Cymru to hear their pitch to voters. Joining us today, former Conservative Cabinet Minister Damien Green, Shadow Attorney General Emily Thornberry, Guardian columnist Gabby Hinsliff and political editor of Unheard Tom McTague. This is Politics Live Election 2024. Yes, it was the first big head-to-head debate between Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer on ITV last night. The BBC version of the same thing is coming later on in the month. Let's take a look at a couple of the front pages with their coverage. The Guardian, leaders clash on migration, tax and NHS in ill-tempered debate. And this is the Mail. Headline, fiery Rishi comes out swinging and lands big blows. So the row over tax has erupted onto the airwaves today. You heard it there in the headlines, with the Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves accusing the Prime Minister of lying about Labour's plans costing households £2,000 over 4 years. Damien, has the Prime Minister lied about Labour's tax plans?
No, and I noticed that Labour, just as Keir Starmer didn't in the debate, and Labour haven't since actually taken on the substance. The substance is all clear. It is all committed Labour policies that add up, even after you take off the tax rises they're planning, to 38 billion, which per household is £2,000 a year. That's the extra tax Labour has to explain away.
If, as Rachel Reeves said, Emily, Rishi Sunak lied about those tax plans, that is rejected by Damien, why didn't he say so and refute the claim immediately?
When I watched it, the first question came from a woman who was really struggling and was talking about having to batch cook and not being able to afford to put on her cooker and so on. And I think that Keir was given 45 seconds to either respond to her as a human being, which is what he did, or respond to all this nonsense, these lies, this noise from the Prime Minister. I'm sorry, but he demeans the office of Prime Minister. He has demeaned the civil service. He has used and abused them to put forward a pack of lies. And, I cannot believe that we've got here just after a week, but we are. And we have to call it out for what it is. It is simply untrue. And it isn't. He didn't just lie about this. He also lied about NHS waiting lists, about small boats.
We're going to come back to it,
one thing
Emily.
after another, and they just feel that they're so desperate. That's what they're going to do now. That's what they're going to do.
Did last night's debate move the dial?
I suspect not. Looking at where we are, looking at how far behind the Conservatives are, you're going to need to do something truly astonishing in a TV debate that half the country is either not watching or kind of only half watching while doing something else. And Sunak was the more efficient performer. He hit the marks he wanted to hit. He got across the lines he wanted to get. We're all arguing today about tax. I'm sure that's what he wanted out of it. And Starmer was more empathetic. He related much better to the audience. He sounded like he understood them. So, they've both played to their strengths. I don't think anybody watching it was going to go, wow, everything I thought has been blown out of the water.
Right, what does this row say about the nature of the debate so far? And there is a truth. We are talking about this. Was that the plan?
Oh, absolutely. It has to be the plan. It does remind us all of the 350 million. That's
during the EU referendum campaign.
Absolutely. And I don't think actually that was a lie, but I think it was an exaggeration of you know, a reality that they were trying to get across, and they sparked a row. Everyone started talking about it, and then you focused on the money. And I think they want to do that again today. I think some of the back and forward you see today about this £2,000 figure comes down to, well, what are the Treasury numbers here? What are they actually standing by, and what are they not standing by? They're clearly not standing by that entire figure, but there seems to be something, and I think that then starts getting a debate rolling. And the key thing for me is that Rishi Sunak's campaign looked like it was cratering before yesterday. It doesn't feel like that to me now, but will it win him the election? I don't think so.
Well, let's listen to the exchange from last night's debate.
Of course I know everyone is only just starting to feel the benefits of it, but inflation is back to normal, wages are growing, taxes are now being cut. Keir Starmer would put all that progress at risk. He would put up everyone's taxes by £2,000. £2,000 in higher taxes for every working family in our country.
Rishi Sunak rather than an exchange, but we're joined by policy and analysis correspondent from BBC Verify, Ben Chu. Hello to you, Ben. Was that claim from Rishi Sunak in last night's debate that Labour would put up households' taxes by £2,000 something that was produced by the Treasury?
Well, Joe, that's certainly what the Conservative leader implied. Let's see what he actually said. Independent Treasury officials have costed Labour policies, and they amount to a £2,000 tax rise for every working family. First of all, let's explain how that £2,000 figure is generated. So the Tories have added up what they say the costs of Labour's additional spending commitments over the next 4 years will be, and come to a cumulative sum of £38.5 billion. Then they've divided this figure by the number of households in the UK with at least one working person. Now, that's about 18 million. And that produces the figure of around £2,000 per household. But this morning, that letter emerged from the chief civil servant at the Treasury, written to Labour on the 3rd of June. And this really distances the Treasury from that calculation. And it says this: £38 billion used in the Conservative Party's publication includes costs beyond those provided by the civil service and published online by Treasury. It goes on, any costings derived from other sources or produced by other organisations should not be presented as having been produced by the civil service. And he says, I have reminded ministers and advisers that this should be the case. Now, this is important because the Treasury is saying that it did produce some costings of Labour's policies, but that it did not produce that £38.5 billion figure. That's because other figures were used by the Tories to get to that overall total. Therefore, the £2,000 figure of supposed tax rises under a future Labour government, a figure which derives from that overall total, also cannot be attributed to the Treasury. And, Joe, by the way, the assumptions fed into the costings of Labour policies that the Treasury did produce were based on assumptions fed to them by political special advisers. And some of those assumptions really are questionable. So that's another reason to be wary of this £2,000 per household tax claim, which so dominated that debate last night.
Ben, we'll come back to you in a moment on NHS waiting lists. Damien, first of all, you said in your opening statement on the programme that it would be £2,000 a year. Well, that's not correct.
£2,000 a Parliament.
Right.
Yeah.
Are we sure about our figures here, about what you're
yeah.
accusing Labour of secretly hiding away in terms of tax plans? You've just heard Ben Chu, my colleague there, saying that these assumptions are questionable and they cannot be wholly attributed to the Treasury. So do you want to correct that for the record?
No, because the vast majority of them, the lion's share of them, are Treasury figures that,
but not all of them.
that are available online. The others are from outside organisations like the Institute for Government, because the Treasury hasn't costed every Labour commitment, but all the ones it has costed are there and are online. And so the 38 billion figure is actually quite generous. I mean, if you look to Labour, if you look at the substance of it, the biggest proportion of that comes from Labour's energy policy, which Labour originally said would cost 28 billion a year. They now say, oh, they're only going to put 28 billion in the whole Parliament over it. And we have taken that figure and reduced it to 23.7 billion because we accept, they say, by 2030. So actually, these are very, very serious, credible figures which Labour has to answer. If they say it's not 2,000, tell us what it is.
Right. Is it beyond the realms of possibility that your plans will cost households £2,000 £2,000 over 4 years, £500 a year.
It will not happen. We are not going to raise income tax. We are not going to raise VAT. We are not going to raise taxes against individual households. We are not.
So business
taxes.
It is
a lie. It is a lie. We have made it perfectly clear what it is that we're going to do. We're going to raise VAT when it comes to private schools. We know what we're going to spend that money on. We are going to close tax loopholes, and we're going to close the tax loopholes that remain open on non-DOMs. We have made that perfectly clear. We will produce a manifesto that will be completely costed, and we will put it before the public, and they can trust it. And you know what? What I would like, actually, if the Tories are going to spend public money on getting civil servants to put through a sausage machine things that begin with nonsense, then why don't they actually? We'd be quite happy if they also put their own stuff through, because they're the ones who are saying they're going to get rid of national insurance. They're going to introduce this dad's army for teenagers. They've got this new tax cut for pensioners.
Yep.
You know, all of these things. Well, why don't we get the Treasury to have a look at that and tell us how much that's going to cost? Well, the reason I'm angry is because they have essentially put nonsense through the Treasury and added other things as well. And then the Prime Minister has gone on to this debate to say the Treasury says this, and we've got a letter from the Permanent Secretary saying please don't do that. So not only are they lying, but they're also abusing the civil service, and it cheapens our politics.
Well, let's just bring up this tweet, Damien. You can respond if you're being accused of cheap politics here in the middle of the campaign. Gus O'Donnell, former Cabinet Secretary, top civil servant in the country as he was. Getting civil servants to cost opposition policies in run-up to election needs to stop. In past, both parties have done it. It's unsavoury practice, as assumptions provided by special advisers are biased to make party political scoring points. Next government should not do it.
All governments have always done it, including governments where Gus was the most powerful civil servant in the land. So, he can argue that case, but he was there when it happened. But I revert to the point that the substance has not been challenged by the Labour Party. I mean,
it has been challenged by us.
Okay, give us a moment and I will. So, for example, the bit I know about. No, I'm challenged, right? So 13,000. Hang on.
You don't want to debate.
So 13,000. You've just said to me we're not challenging it. Let me challenge it. You say, right, that in order for us to introduce these 13,000 police officers and PCSOs, it's going to cost us...
PCSOs, it's not police officers. It's just PCSOs.
It's PCSOs and police officers, and it's 13,000 of them. And what we're going to do is we're going to be able to pay for those because of efficiencies that we'll make by making sure that police officers, that all the different police regions buy their truncheons, their cars, their everything else from one single source.
All right. But it's efficiency saving.
And the think tank from the police says how much money it will, and we'll say we're going to spend half of that. Now,
all right.
The Tories have picked up on that.
Very briefly,
and they
though,
said that's new, and we need to have Barnett consequentials, which means extra money given to Scotland. It's not true. It's money that's being saved. That's just one example.
Yeah, all right, but look, I think for viewers,
we can certainly say,
watching this and listening to the figures being bandied about, is the real dishonesty in this campaign so far actually about the hard choices that lie ahead, whoever wins this election, when it comes to tax and spending plans and borrowing?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the ultimate reality that viewers should know is that taxes will go up under both of these parties. They have to. There's a hole in their public spending plans. We need to spend more on defence. Both of them have pledged to increase spending on defence.
Yeah.
We've got an ageing society. Our public services are on their knees. Of course, the taxes are going to have to go up. They'll just go up in different ways to the ones that they're pledging not to rise.
Gabby?
I think this is a game that gets played every election. Figures get bandied about, and for the voter sitting at home, it's quite confusing. What you want is just politicians to say what they're going to do, attack what the other guys are going to do, and then you can make up your mind in between. This kind of imaginary war between made-up figures that both sides are producing. You know, we are going to hear this from all parties during the campaign. I think it's a turn-off for a lot of people.
What do you think it says, though, just briefly, Damien, about the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who said when he became leader of the party and Prime Minister that his government would have integrity, professionalism and accountability? What's changed?
Nothing's changed. What he said last night was true. It's credible. There's a 24-page document out there which actually says almost all of these have been costed by the Treasury. It doesn't say that all of them have been costed by the Treasury. So it has been completely straightforward from the start.
All right. Let's listen to... Well, hang on. No. Let's listen to another part of the debate, which was about NHS waiting lists. Let's have a listen.
We are now making progress. The waiting lists are coming down. But what Keir Starmer didn't mention to you, which you did, Julie...
Waiting list 7.2 million, they're now 7.5 million. He says they're coming down, and this is the guy who says he's good at maths.
Yeah, they are now coming down. They are now coming down.
7.2 when you said you get them down. 7.2 million, they're now 7.5 million. I'd like you to explain how they're coming down.
Because they were coming down from where they were when they were higher.
7.2.
And they're now on their way down.
Yes, that did get a laugh in the audience there. Ben Chu can join us again. Can you explain the waiting list figures for us?
I can, Joe. In effect, the Prime Minister and Keir Starmer were both right, and we've got a verified chart to sort of walk you through it. So this is NHS waiting times in England, which is the target that they are talking about. And you can see here, it did peak last September at about 2.8 million, and it has come down to around 7.8 million, down to 7.5 million down now. So the Prime Minister is right that waiting lists have come down. But this is what Keir Starmer was talking about. He was talking about when Rishi Sunak made his pledge to get waiting lists down, which was in January 2023. And waiting lists then were around 7.3 million. So relative to them, they have gone up. So they're both right. It depends on which period you're talking about.
Ben Chu, thank you very much. How do you think that looks to the audience, Damien, when the two parties are picking different time periods to explain and back up their claims?
Well, I think people will get... I think Ben's explanation was perfectly clear. Rishi said last night it has come down from what was a higher number. And we know that the numbers have gone up because of the strikes. I mean, that's the underlying point. The numbers are basically coming down. Every time there's a strike, they go up again.
But whose fault are the strikes going on?
Well, I think you might as well talk to the BMA about that.
Not the government.
Why? It's not... Well, the BMA is asking for 35%. No government. I don't think
Labour have ruled that out too.
Yeah, OK, fine. In which case, the BMA should actually come off that and start talking seriously. The government has tried to talk seriously to the BMA. The BMA has refused to do it. One has to be, if I'm regrettably cynical about this, I think the BMA is running a series of political strikes.
Well, we heard from Keir Starmer that he wouldn't give them the 35% increase, but he really couldn't answer the question about what he would do to resolve the strikes. What would Labour do? Don't say get round the table.
Well, the first thing we do... I'm sorry. The first thing we do is talk to them. I mean, sorry about that, but it has to be the first step you do. Right? You have to sit down, you have to talk to people.
And beyond that.
And you have to... And when we are, when we are given access to the full set of figures, we will be in a better position to be able to negotiate properly. But at the moment, all we can do is hope that we get the opportunity to serve. And if we do, then we will begin by treating people with proper respect, not blaming them for the increasing waiting lists that were increasing before the pandemic. I mean, people used to, when we were in government, people used to complain if they had to wait 48 hours to see a GP. I mean, just imagine that. We had the best satisfaction figures with the NHS that we've ever had, and now we have the worst waiting list on record.
Taxes went up to help pay for that. One of your proposals, Labour's proposal, 40,000 extra appointments, scans and operations a week during evenings and weekends.
Yes.
How are you going to achieve that?
We're going to pay for it. That's the first thing. So we're going to pay people extra to do it. And we're going to ask them to help us get through this. And it won't be compulsory, but we will be asking people to help, and we will be able, as a result, to produce more appointments in order to
And how will you fund that then? When you say you're going to pay more for it, how will you fund it?
So we're going to pay for it by closing the loophole on non-doms, which hasn't been closed properly. And we're going to be paying for it by making sure that we close more of the loopholes. And we have, I think it's 5.5 as a result of that, and that we're going to be able to use.
5.5 what?
It's 5.5 million. That we're going to...
Pounds, OK.
I'm not sure. But anyway, but that's how we're doing it.
It actually says the extra appointments and scanners will cost £1.3 billion.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
All right.
And I knew I had it wrong, so I just
Well, figures are important, as we've discovered from the debate last night.
But the principle is that that's where we get the money from. We get the money from, closing the loophole on non-doms, which has only been partially closed, and we then also close the other loopholes as well. And that's what... And as I say, when we put forward our manifesto, all the figures will be there, and we will be able to have them properly tested at that stage, rather than the sort of fantasy stuff. Do not take your briefings from the Tory party when it comes to this, because, you know, we will be able to put forward it properly. And that's how we do it.
All right.
And of course, it's not going to be, it won't be enough by itself, and we will need to keep working at it. And what we most importantly need to do is to have an economy that is stable and growing.
Sure.
And
but we don't know whether it's going to grow, because it hasn't grown very much over the last 14 years. And there isn't anything transformative that I've seen so far from Labour, apart from pledging to grow it, that will change that.
What about changing our industries when it comes to, you know, greening our industries, changing the way in which we get
But let's just focus on the NHS waiting list.
Policies.
People do understand waiting lists. People really do understand whether it's 7.2, 7.5, 7.8 million at whichever point. It's really not very good, is it?
Well, the Conservative record is absolutely lamentable on the NHS. I mean, that's obvious. Anybody who uses hospitals for their kids, they don't measure these things in millions. They measure it in hours. When you go to the to the A&E, it takes you 12 hours to be seen, or something like that. That's your experience, or ringing the doctors at 8 a.m. to try and get an appointment. I mean, I think that we're in a real bind as a country here, because the Conservatives have put more money into the NHS, and the Labour Party are saying they're not going to increase taxes. The reality is we are a poorer country than we thought we were ever since 2008. There isn't that much money, and we're seeing the cost of that now in the NHS. I mean, look at those figures that Ben put out. They're appalling. From something like 2 million on the waiting list up to before the pandemic, where they'd already gone up quite a lot, and then they've just gone out of control.
Do you think they're credible, those figures from Labour, those 40,000 extra appointments a week?
I think they are potentially doable, and I can see how you can make things feel different quite quickly in small ways. Settle the doctors' strike for a start. You know, if they can do that, you get a very sort of instant feed through to waiting lists. But I don't think the kind of transformative change that people want to see in the NHS, that's going to involve what? Fixing social care, because the huge problem at the moment with the NHS is people are stuck in hospitals because you can't get them out. You know, there's a huge shift underway that needs to happen to preventative care from the sort of the hospital electric care that we're delivering. I don't see yet the money from any party, including, you know, the Liberal Democrats, who've got proposals on social care, but I think probably not funded to the extent they would need to be. I don't yet see anything. And it reminds me a lot of 1997, where Labour came coasting in saying we're going to fix the NHS. And it was really in the second term, and towards that happened,
2000s, really,
and towards the end of the first term that the reform started.
But we have been honest about that. I mean, you know, when you look at what Keir's plans are, you know, we talk about our first steps. We talk about saying, you know, we appreciate the hard decisions that we made. We appreciate there isn't a lot of money, but there are decisions that will be made that will be different the way that we will do it, and we have long-term aspirations, which are what are in Keir's mission.
Damien?
And we have taken steps to, because I mean, Gabby's right about social care. That's one of the elements. Offering the new urgent treatment centres, and we've got one of those in Kent, which works really well, which keeps people out of hospital, allows people to get urgent treatments faster, training more GPs. Those things we're doing, those are practical things that actually don't gain many headlines, but actually are the way to solve the NHS.
This was another key moment of the debate. Let's take a look.
If you had loved ones on a long waiting list for surgery, would you, if you felt that that was the only way forward, use private healthcare? Rishi Sunak?
Yes.
Keir Starmer?
No.
Absolutely no, if your loved one was on a waiting list for surgery?
No.
Thank you very much.
I don't use private health.
Okay.
I use the NHS. That's where my wife works, in one of the big hospitals. As I say, it runs through my DNA.
Would your answer be the same, Emily? You wouldn't use private health for a relative who was on a long waiting list?
No, I have.
You have. What did you make of the response from Keir Starmer, Gabby?
I thought that was one of the most interesting moments of the debate, because you've got a very clear divide between the two of them in very short answers, thankfully short answers. But it was Starmer, in a way, when I first watched it, I thought, well, this is uncomfortable for Rishi Sunak, because he's saying, I'd use private healthcare, you know, rather than the NHS. Normally, we expect cabinet ministers to say they use public services like everyone else. But it was Starmer who seemed discomforted. He was the one who seemed to feel that he had to explain why that was the case. You know, you could see him thinking after he'd said it, I need to, you know, maybe I need to expand on that. And as if he felt it would be damaging to him. And I suspect some voters might take it as, well, that's not convincing. You know, if your loved one was in real pain, of course you would do it. But I was surprised that it ended up that way.
Tom?
I thought it was a really bad moment for Keir Starmer. It didn't look real, or it didn't look human. I mean, the reaction that I had was, really? I just don't buy that. And if that is the case, then I'm uncomfortable.
No, it is the truth.
I'm sure it is, but I don't know. I didn't like it.
Sorry, Emily has been very honest and straightforward about that. And I think, I mean, you know, for what it's worth, if I could afford it, then of course I would. Surely your loyalty to your family member and your love of a family member comes before any political ideology. And that, I think, I mean, I agree that was one of the more electrifying moments of an hour's debate, in that actually this was a human response, and I thought Keir
I didn't feel it was inauthentic. I didn't feel he was lying about that. I thought they both answered instinctively. That's what they feel, and you don't often get an instinctive answer in the middle of it.
It gives you an indication that he's more ideological than perhaps he lets on.
Yeah, well, it was an interesting moment, certainly, the way they handled it, not least. Let me talk about another moment, Damien, with you, which was when the Prime Minister said, if I'm forced to choose between securing our borders and our country's security or a foreign court, I'm going to choose our country's security every single time. This is in relation to the European Court on Human Rights and the convention that guides it. Did that sound to you as if in the manifesto, or certainly Rishi Sunak, if elected again, would leave the ECHR?
No, I think with what the policy will be.
What did it say?
And I hope it is the policy, because I've written an article with my friend Matt Warman for the Daily Telegraph suggesting a way forward on the ECHR, which is that we, Britain, should lead the way in reforming it. It clearly needs modernising for the 21st century. And if you go into a negotiation, you've got to have the option. But that's not going to be the first option.
Damien,
the first option is for reform, which is exactly what the ECHR needs.
It didn't sound like that to me, just listening to it last night from Rishi Sunak. If it is either in the manifesto or if the outcome of the election is one where Rishi Sunak puts that into play, would you support it,
well,
leaving the foreign court and the European Convention?
Depends what the reform is.
Leaving.
But we would only. I mean, I don't want to leave the court, and I don't think that would be the right course of action. But I do think the court needs reforming. And if you're going into what will be a long and complex negotiation about reforming an international institution, then clearly, just logically, you have to have that as the end point. But it's an end point I would profoundly hope we never get to.
I think this is so interesting, because I think there are many decent Conservatives who would not want to leave the European Court of Human Rights. I mean, for heaven's sake, it was one of the creations of Winston Churchill. It was like the Tory party has moved such a long way from where it used to be. And yes, we would be, if we left the European Court of Human Rights, if we were no longer it was largely written by British lawyers in the first place. I mean, it's extraordinary. All right. And to leave our place and to undermine our standing internationally as a result. Of course, many decent Tories don't want to do that. And Rishi Sunak is just, is chasing the far right and doing this.
All right, well, let's have a look at this, because, yes, another debate is coming down the line. The end of the week, the BBC's election debate with 7 parties, Friday at 7:30, BBC One, and the cast list, the lineup, has been confirmed. You can see them all there. Reform newly announced, party leader Nigel Farage, the deputy leader of the Liberal Democrats, Daisy Cooper, deputy leader of Labour, Angela Rayner, Penny Mordaunt for the Conservatives, leader of the House, Reen Ap-Yorwerth, whom we're going to talk to in just a moment, for Plaid Cymru, Carla Denyer from the Greens, and Stephen Flynn for the SNP. He is the leader of the SNP at Westminster. Are you looking forward to it?
I am. I love a debate, but I think this one is going to be... I mean, there's a risk that this one descends into an absolute zoo, I think, because you've got 7 people all trying to get in. That's going to mean very short answers if you want to get through more than one topic. And you've got some quite wild cards in there. Nigel Farage is the obvious one, but both Angela Rayner and Penny Mordaunt are lively debaters, so I think it could be quite entertaining to watch. But I think there's a risk of it descending into a shouting match where you just can't, no heat, it's all heat and no light.
Tom?
Well, I think Rishi Sunak, in a weird way, has got nothing to lose. Why didn't he go for it? He's so far behind in the polls. Go and take on Nigel Farage directly. But instead he's handed it to somebody else. I think this was maybe a missed opportunity.
Oh, right. Well, Damien, what do you say to that? I mean, Rishi Sunak wanted or did challenge Keir Starmer to a debate every week of the campaign. Why not?
I think the leaders of the major parties should debate each other and not get caught up in I mean, I slightly agree with Gabby. I'm good luck to whoever's chairing that.
Yes,
but
no one thinks of the presenters.
I'm completely confident that Penny will do brilliantly.
Yeah, well, you would say that, of course. And what about Angela Rayner, Emily?
I think a debate between Penny Mordaunt and Angela Rayner would be really interesting.
Oh.
And I would hope that they wouldn't spend their time talking over one another or spouting absolute drivel.
Right, well, make sure you watch Friday's debate on the BBC at 7:30. Now, this week we've been asking for your comments and questions as part of the BBC's Your Vote, Your Voice campaign. We've had some practical questions, so this is a reminder of some voting deadlines. Let's have a look here. The deadline to register to vote in the election is 11:59 p.m. on Tuesday, the 18th of June. Make a mental note. The deadline to apply for a postal vote is 5 p.m. on Wednesday, the 19th of June. Yeah, good questions, important practical questions. Now, let's go to Wales, where First Minister Vaughan Gething is facing a no-confidence motion, which he looks set to lose. We're joined by BBC Wales's political editor, Gareth Lewis. Gareth, remind us how we actually got here. Oh, Gareth, Gareth, sorry, we just missed the beginning of you. Start again.
No problem at all. Yeah, look, this all goes back to a donation that Vaughan Gething received during his recent leadership campaign to become Welsh Labour leader and First Minister from a company whose owner has previously been convicted of environmental offences. It's gone down badly with opposition parties. It's gone down badly too, it has to be said, with some of his own Labour colleagues. Now, until yesterday, it looked likely that Vaughan Gething would survive this vote because Labour has 30, so exactly half of the seats here in the Senedd, and a Labour MS would have to abstain in order for Mr Gething to lose. Look, unlikely because that's a big deal anyway of its own right. Also unlikely because we're in the middle of a general election campaign. But the factors have changed since then, and it's emerged that two MSs, Hannah Blythin, a minister who Vaughan Gething actually sacked last month, and Lee Waters, the former Deputy Transport Minister, the architect, if you like, of the 20 miles per hour law, are unwell. Therefore, they cannot attend, and the Conservatives and other opposition parties are refusing requests to allow the pairing system to come into play. Now, they do operate in a hybrid format here. What we're not clear with at the moment is whether that illness actually prevents them from being able to vote remotely either. The Conservatives, I think to say, are keeping open this tiny sliver of a possibility that ultimately they might vote remotely, but as things stand, Vaughan Gething is set to lose this motion of no confidence because it does not look likely that they will vote. I should stress it is a non-binding vote. Nonetheless, given the pressure of the past few months, this will put Mr Gething in a really difficult position. Welsh Labour have already made it clear he will not resign, but could there be pressure if he does lose from within his own party? And again, Joe, going back to that general election campaign, look at it partly through the prism of that. How might this, or not, affect Labour's wider general election campaign? Is it a stumble on that careful path that he's been treading, he hopes, to Downing Street, that Sir Keir Starmer can put up with? Or does some pressure come from on top for something here to change if, as we expect, Mr Gething loses that vote? The vote, by the way, about 6, as long as a piece of string kind of scenario, isn't it? Between about 6 and 6:30 this evening. One thing I can tell you, all those energy drinks we've stockpiled for the overnight on the 4th of July will come in very, very useful this evening.
Yes, it'll be a dress rehearsal for staying up. Gareth Lewis, thank you very much. Well, it's certainly not looking good, is it, for Vaughan Gething, Emily? This will be extremely damaging if he loses a vote of no confidence, binding or not.
I thought that was very telling that it's non-binding. I think that, therefore, it is a bit of a gimmick from the opposition parties. At this stage, I do think that the people of Wales are interested in the general election and how we can make their lives better rather than this.
Really? A vote of no confidence in the Senedd, in the First Minister, Labour's First Minister in Wales, won't really have any impact on the campaign at all?
No, I think, as I say, I think that it's gimmicks from the opposition, and I don't think that it is of such importance as the general election is. And we're not going to be knocked off path. I have complete confidence in him.
But Keir Starmer always makes the point that Wales is his model for Britain. He says it all the time in the House of Commons.
I think it's the Conservatives that always say, look at Wales if you want to see how...
No, Keir has said it himself, that Wales is their model. Their newly selected First Minister is facing a vote of confidence, and apparently a couple of his members are not going to be there, one of whom he recently sacked. I'm raising an eyebrow about that. I think this is
how will that help
people?
How will that help people who are batch cooking this weekend in order to be able to afford their meals
if
for the rest
Labour
of the
Wales
week?
is replicated
What
across the rest of the UK, people like that's lives will be worse.
Scrimp and save to buy shoes.
Exactly.
No, I mean, seriously.
All right. Well,
these are games.
Right. Well, let Damien answer. Sorry, don't talk over each other because it's difficult to hear. But go on, Damien.
The answer is that if the chaos of the Labour Wales, if that was replicated across the rest of the UK, then people across the rest of the UK would have their lives made worse, and that would affect the poorest people worse.
First of all, it's not chaos, and secondly, it wouldn't be replicated anyway because it would be a UK government, and this is an issue which is happening in Wales.
All right. Well, let's stay in Cardiff because I'm joined by the leader of Plaid Cymru, Rian ap Iorwerth. Welcome to Politics Live. We're asking all the parties to do this, so it's your opportunity, Rian, to give a 30-second or thereabouts pitch on your election campaign.
Well, in simple terms, Plaid has a positive vision for Wales. We want to build a better economy, get rid of the inequalities that have held us back for so many years. In this election, we know the Tories are on their way out, but Labour isn't offering a new vision, isn't offering anything for Wales. So in this election, Plaid Cymru, with our positive vision, can also say we can stand up for Wales and make sure that we are not ignored, that our voice is relevant in Westminster.
Right. I mean, one of the issues your party has been talking about, which the others haven't, is Brexit. You've called for the UK to rejoin the single market and the customs union. Why is that a priority?
You're right. It's hard to believe, isn't it, that 8 years have passed since that vote to leave the European Union, and regretfully for me, as a staunch pro-European.
Although Wales voted to leave, of course.
That's what I was going to say. And unfortunately and regretfully for me, Wales did vote to leave. We took the position as a party that clearly we respect the way people vote in a democratic vote, but there was a way to leave the European Union which could have taken into account much more what we needed to do in that relationship with the European Union to secure our economy and other elements of the well-being of Wales. And one thing that we've been saying from the start is that we could have left and remained in the customs union and the single market. We still say that. We'd like Wales to be able to make the choice itself, but in the absence of that, it has to be the whole of the UK.
Is rejoining the EU or the customs union, the single market, effectively rejoining the EU, more of a priority for Plaid Cymru than independence?
Oh, I think they're all tied together. They're all tied in how we push forward the interests of Wales. I have no doubt that small nations working together across a European continent, working together on trade and all the social aspects are good for us. We lost that argument in 2016, but we can absolutely still make the argument on how to make sure that the relationship that we have with Europe is as good as possible. And of course, I'm as somebody who is absolutely convinced that the best way for us to move forward as a nation is to have all those levers of change as an independent country. I know we're not at the point where we'd win a vote on that, but it's my job to make people curious about what the opportunities are that come from that.
All right, Rian, we have Damien Green and Emily Thornberry here, and our other guests too, of course, in the studio. Emily, why aren't you embracing the idea of your pledge to have closer ties to Europe in the way that Rian is suggesting?
Look, the agreement that was signed on Christmas Eve, if you remember, was really sort of pushed together at the last minute. It has a number of holes in it, and there is, within that agreement, ways in which those holes can be patched, but there has not been the work put into fixing those problems. I mean, the most obvious one being a veterinary agreement. I mean, why we can't agree that our lamb chops are the same standard as French lamb chops, I really don't know. But they all have to be checked going in and out, and it's just putting up all kinds of barriers which we don't need. So there are a number of things that we can do, and we need to do that. And if we do get the opportunity to serve, we will certainly be sorting out problems ridiculous, like bread and butter.
Well, Rian, does that not sound like a sensible way forward, rather than your wholesale embracing single market and customs union again when this was settled?
Let's just deal with the issue. We have a very significant issue with £4 billion, isn't it, I think, being spent on a new customs arrangements, money that is being wasted and that could actually be put into building a proper relationship. I happen to have the port of Holyhead in the constituency that I serve in the Welsh Parliament, and the drop in traffic through that port, the loss of jobs within that port is something that is a great regret to me, as there's the loss of businesses that used to trade in food and drink, for example, with Europe. I want to protect businesses of the future. I want to build links for the future that are good good for the Welsh economy and the UK economy. The way to do that for me is customs union, single market. Let's be pragmatic about the way forward.
Are you disappointed that Labour isn't going further then, yes or no?
Desperately disappointed. You know, we worked with Labour actually years ago after the Brexit vote to put forward a document that mapped out a way to address this. Damien Green, I think, was pretty positive about what we put forward.
The exports of food and drink that you were talking about, you know, could be sorted with a proper veterinary agreement.
Right. Well, Damien, is this something that you'd like to do personally but can't because you're part of the
No, I respect the result of the referendum. And actually, I mean, talking specifically about food safety, just as we've got the Port of Holyhead, I have the place where they check the incoming food in my constituency, recently opened. And we have very recently had some meat coming from Romania that, put it this way, you would not want to have eaten yourself. So actually, these food checks are keeping us safe. So it is not true, I'm afraid, that everything that comes across the channel we can accept willy-nilly.
Right, Reen, just finally, because we have to leave it in a moment, do you want to say anything else about particularly your policy on the single market?
Well, I think we need to be realistic about how much damage has been caused following leaving the European Union. Yes, we respect the vote that was taken, and yes, I am absolutely as pro-European as I was prior to that referendum. But we have to be pragmatic. We have to find ways forward, and customs union and single market is one way of doing that. We need those close links for the interests of our country to be protected in so many different ways. Why are Labour not willing to talk about this? I just don't get it.
Well, we'll ask them again over the campaign, I'm sure. Reen ap Iorwerth from Plaid Cymru, thank you very much for joining us. Let me bring you this news. You'll remember we've been discussing the tax claim made by Rishi Sunak last night. The UK's official statistics regulator is now looking into the claim by the Conservatives that they're making about the tax burden families could face if Labour wins the general election. The Office for Statistics Regulation, which is an independent regulatory arm of the UK, is exploring the veracity or otherwise. Does that make you nervous?
No.
Well, that was short and sweet. What do you make of that, Tom?
Well, I mean, in one sense, it just keeps the debate going, doesn't it? We're going to be talking for a lot longer about £2,000 and what is the veracity, how much is Labour's plans going to go up. But I do think things have changed a bit from 2016. I mean, I think the Labour comeback that Rishi is like Boris Johnson, he is lying. I could imagine that landing because people are so sick of the Conservative Party.
We've only got a few minutes left, and I just want to show you this. Have a look.
Hi, it's David Cameron. I was calling because of the election on July the 4th. I'm here with Paul Holmes, your local MP, who's keen to win your support for July the 4th, and we'll be leaving one of these in your door. Thanks very much. Have a good day.
So, David Cameron, how would you imagine it, the Foreign Secretary, former Prime Minister, knocking on your door, Gabby, personally delivering leaflets? What would you say? Respond.
I'm grateful we've got a dog, that's what I can say.
Gabby.
No, his mother-in-law lives down the road, so I wouldn't be enormously surprised to see him on my doorstep. I kind of like the fact, though, that being an ex-Prime Minister and Lord Cameron of whatever doesn't excuse you from having to go out and shove leaflets through letterboxes.
Everybody has to do it, don't they?
I thought he was on holiday, so good to see he's back.
Yeah. I know, but I mean, even I was slightly surprised when I saw it was David Cameron up at the door.
Going around the country, I've seen on social media that he's supporting a lot of campaigns, and Gabby's right that actually one of the unheralded glories of our democracies, however senior you are, every so often you have to go knock on people's doors who may or may not want to talk to you and have a conversation with them. That's very, very good for all politicians.
Have you had anyone interesting knock on your door?
God, no. I've seen that the Americans are amazed by this, that they're commenting.
Are they?
They're
yeah,
saying, you know,
well,
can you just imagine the sort of Secretary of State?
Most other countries are.
Are they?
Most other countries just don't do the door-to-door.
Is that right? Most others
Absolutely.
I mean, I can imagine that's the case, certainly in America.
In Europe, they don't.
Well, I should just say the list of candidates, by the way, for the constituency where David Cameron was knocking on the door, Hamble Valley. It's a new constituency. You can see the list of candidates on the BBC website. But that's all we have time for today. Of course, much more campaigning to do over the next few weeks. And I'll be back tomorrow with more Politics Live at 12:15 on BBC Two and the BBC iPlayer. Thank you to my guests.
To commemorate D-Day, 80 years on.